Fred, he's got a massive head, the massivest head in the sea. Oh, Fred, he's got a massive head, the massivest head indeed.
Deep below the surface of the shiny blue sea is a bustling, busy and boisterous city. Fishy creatures of all sorts live within, from the long to the tall, to the plump to the thin. Elegant seahorses and fish shaped like stars, inflatable pufferfish in the bubbly boulevards. A real old mix, I think you'd agree, which is why this tale is a strange one, see. At the edge of the town, between the cave and the clam, lived an unusual fish in an old baked bean can. He loved rock and roll, jam, and he giggled with glee. But when others looked at Fred, those things they didn't see. And an extraordinary fish is what everyone said, for Fred the fish had a rather large head. At market, records and jammy cakes made him pleased, but wherever he went he would always be teased. The lobster, the seahorse and clownfish would laugh and say, "Have you ever seen a head as big as that?" And at the end of a shift he'd rush home after work. He'd bump his big head on the door and it hurt. His friend, Ron the red snapper, looked on concerned at Fred's gaff, but others would look on and then point and then laugh. "You know, Fred," said Ron, "it really is a shame that some don't see people for their hearts and their brains." Fred thought and he nodded with his unusually large head. As a tear fell from his eye, he turned and he fled. When things made Fred sad, he would go off on long hikes to look at the world and its charms and its sights. His flappy fin took him to the far side of town, where all the delights of sea life could be found. A crowd had gathered to see the hottest new act. Johnny Hammerhead was awesome, and that was a fact. As the hammerhead shark swam by, looking so cool, Fred's head did whiz like a whizzy whirlpool. "He's got a big head, but everyone thinks he rules." You know what? Ron's right. In the whole of the sea, there isn't a fish as caring or as groovy as me. Well, Freddy felt better, and he continued his trip past the dark seaweed forest and the great desert strip, through the coral-filled hills and past that old sunken ship. As he stopped to rest, he heard the odd muffled cries from the dark, dank cave where the stingray did hide. Fred thought he sensed trouble in his big orange head, but he dashed into the cave when others might have fled. The cave it stretched on, it went up and then down. Fred passed the bones of old monsters and unicorn crowns. He passed rubies and emeralds, of which there were lots, and at the end of the cave there was an old wooden box. From within that great box came the odd muffled cries. Fred peeped through a hole, and to his surprise he saw the clownfish, the lobster and the seahorse did hide. Now those three particular creatures who had been laughing at Fred had run into a sight that had filled them with dread, for the noise that their loud laughing did make had caused the great grumpy old stingray to wake. He chased them into his dank stingray lair, and he threw them in an old wooden box that lay there. The box was made from fine English oak, and the thought of escape was a very faint hope. "I'll get you out," whispered Fred to the three, but the stingray was waking and it was time for his tea. He'd been on a diet and a healthy detox, but now he craved a fish from his English oak box. Fred said, "There's only one thing for it," and like a torpedo he dashed, and the box did burst in a great splintered blast. Fred's massive head was amazing, with power galore. The stingray, unimpressed though, let out a roar. So the little group dashed in the direction of town, past the emeralds and rubies and unicorn crowns. As the stingray gained on them, Fred had to think fast, and an idea came to his great head at last. They reached the mouth of the cave. He swam up to the top, and he took a look at a great shiny rock. His friends hid behind an old jar of jam, and as the stingray emerged, the rock Fred did ram. There was a wallop, a crunch, a bang and a crash. The rock did tumble and the stingray was trapped. The three creatures were no longer kidnapped, so they danced and they jumped and they whooped and they clapped. The three former bullies who had laughed at Fred realised they had been mean to a quite heroic fish, and if not for him, there'd have been a stingray dish. So they went to their hero, and sorries were said. They were saved by a fish with a great massive head. And when they reached the big city, and the tale was said of the stingray, the rock, and a great massive head, the crowd now cheered for a brave fish called Fred. So if you ever feel worried about the way that you look, just have a think about the funny old fish in this book. For Fred found his faults were not faults at all, but in fact they were the envy of all.